And welcome back, nieces and nephews, for part 2 of the top 5 best Universal Classic Monster movies. We did in our previous episode numbers 13 to 6, and now we're going to do the top 5 with a couple of honorable mentions. So get ready, here we go. Next at number 5, The Creature from the Black Lagoon, 1954. I love The Creature from the Black Lagoon. Obviously, you could see it's one of my more prominent posters behind me. The Creature from the Black Lagoon was directed by Jack Arnold, who made movies like It Came from Outer Space, would go on to make Revenge of the Creature, and one of the best sci-fi movies ever made, The Incredible Shrinking Man. Jack Arnold really kick-started this part of the Universal Monster phase, which was coming out of the 1930s and the 1940s with more gothic horror, more literary horror. And The Creature from the Black Lagoon and the Gill Man as a monster kind of, to me, is the crossover movie from the classic gothic monsters into the new 1950s sort of creature features. It's post-World War II, it's post-nuclear bomb, so you have these more creature-based films. And Creature from the Black Lagoon, obviously with the word creature in it, fits right into that as this sort of primal, prehistoric creature that is lost in the Amazon jungle. You have a beautiful Julia Adams in a very sensual swimming piece where the creature is beneath the water, mimicking her movements. It's one of the most fascinating, one of the most creepy little scenes that's in the movie, and predates the shark in Jaws underneath the swimming Chrissy at the opening of that film. And you could tell that Spielberg's opening of Jaws is a homage to this scene from The Creature from the Black Lagoon. Creature from the Black Lagoon also, from a technical standpoint, has some wonderful underwater photography. So Creature from the Black Lagoon, it's a must-see on the monster movie list. Next, at number 4, it's Dracula, 1931. Starring Bela Lugosi. We all know this one based off of Bram Stoker's famous novel about a vampire in Transylvania who goes after Mina and Lucy. It was actually a book and then a play that was performed on stage, and Bela Lugosi, in his first real movie role, who was brought to Hollywood after he performed this role on stage, and he brought his Romanian accent and sexuality, which had not been seen on the big screen before. You have the great Dwight Fry playing Renfield, a great character actor known as part of the Universal stable, kind of chewing the scenery in some scenes, almost like a theatrical performance more than a more modern film performance. And Edward Van Sloan, who is another character actor who you would see in a lot of these movies, including Frankenstein, The Mummy. Here he's playing the titular Van Helsing. Now the thing about Dracula, it was shot by cinematographer Carl Freund, who directed The Mummy, and Todd Browning was the director. Todd Browning, known also for the movie Freaks. Now, Todd Browning, for some reason, left a lot of the direction to Carl Freund, so it was somewhat of a disorganized shoot. Now, most of this film actually has no score, except for some of Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake at the beginning of the opening credits sequence. But for the most part, it's pretty quiet, and it kind of adds an eeriness, an unsettling feeling to it. Now, for me, unfortunately, the film is a little dated in the way it's shot. It feels like a stage play that has just been shot and put onto the screen. So a lot of times you have characters talking about things that happened off screen rather than showing us what happened. So in that way, it's not one of my favorite ones, though it's up at number 4, really because of Bela Lugosi and his performance and the iconic look of Dracula that he delivers in this. So at number 4, you can't go wrong with Bela Lugosi as Dracula. Next, at number 3, Frankenstein, 1931. So this one, Dracula comes out, and then Frankenstein. These two are really the ones that started the Universal Classic Monster series, if you will, that would go on for decades. You have Boris Karloff. Now, Bela Lugosi famously was offered the role of the Frankenstein monster, but turned it down because nobody would recognize him under all the makeup. So it went to Boris Karloff, who had been a character actor in a number of films before this. Boris Karloff, whose real name was William Pratt, was a British actor. And this started one of the greatest horror careers. Just the name Boris, people knew who it was. He would go often as Karloff, just one name. He became, as an actor, known by one name. What's interesting, in the credits for Frankenstein, under Frankenstein's monster in the original print, they just left a question mark. They didn't give you Boris Karloff's name because they wanted to make it creepier that you didn't know who was playing the monster, that the monster might have actually been a real creature made from dead cadavers. This film, again, just like The Invisible Man, was directed by the great James Whale. Not as much humor in this film as he brings to the sequel, which we get into, or as much humor as you see in The Invisible Man, which is almost a black comedy more than outright horror. But Frankenstein is very atmospheric. James Whale uses a very almost German expressionistic look in this film in the art direction and design of the laboratory, or I should say the laboratory. You also have a great character actor, Colin Clive, coming in as Victor Frankenstein, and Dwight Frye, who played Renfield in 1931's Dracula, here is playing Fritz. Not Igor, but Fritz. He wouldn't be Igor until much later. And Edward Van Sloan, who played Van Helsing in Dracula, returns in this film as Victor Frankenstein's mentor, another doctor, Dr. Walden. Frankenstein really holds up as one of the best Universal movies because, in a modern way, unlike Todd Browning's Dracula, which seemed almost like a film stage play, James Whale moves the camera. James Whale uses the camera in a very cinematic way, even though this is one of the early sound films. So you have a very cinematic movie in Frankenstein that actually really holds up over time. And you have certain scenes that are just creepy, especially the most well-known scene with the little girl by the lake. So if you haven't seen Frankenstein, this is the one to maybe start with. At number 2, The Wolfman, 1941. Now this is really where the Wolfman legend begins. Screenwriter Kurt Siodmak kind of created the rules around the Wolfman. Now, werewolves and lycanthropy is something that goes way back into folklore, but the rules of the full moon and Wolfbane and the gypsies and seeing the pentacle in the palm of the next victim all comes from Kurt Siodmak's screenplay for The Wolfman. It's directed by George Wagner. In this, you have Lon Chaney Jr., who is well known as the son of Phantom of the Opera actor Lon Chaney Sr., so the legacy goes on in the monster family. Playing here with Evelyn Ankers and Claude Rains, also who played The Invisible Man and later on the Phantom of the Opera in a color version, playing Larry Talbot's father. This film has a great score to it. Most of the monster scores reuse some of the music from this. You have a great gypsy woman character played by Russian actress Maria Ospinskaya, who actually studied with Stanislavski. The great poem that she delivers, 2 poems actually, but the one that people know well who are fans of the Wolfman is even a man who is pure of heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright.
So you know that one too, huh?
They say this a few times in the movie just to make sure you get it. And Jack Pierce was really able to go more full hog with his wolf makeups in this one versus the Werewolf of London, which came before this. When Lon Chaney Jr. shot this film, it also starred Evelyn Ankers, who really didn't get along with Lon Chaney that well. And she used to get really annoyed with him because apparently while he was in full makeup, he would come up behind her and scare her as the Wolfman, and it pretty much annoyed her. You also have some other great actors who go on to great careers like Ralph Bellamy. That idea of the smoky, dry ice-filled, spooky, haunted woods, the look of that really comes from the original Wolfman. Beware the moon. Oh, look! We have a message coming into the vault. It's a bat mail. Oh, Adam West isn't the only one who gets bat mail, you know. And look, we have here an honorable mention. The honorable... rabies. Some honorable mentions. We have the other Dracula from 1931, which is a Spanish language version. Now, the interesting thing about the Spanish language version of Dracula, it was shot simultaneously as the English language version on the same sets, but done at night. What was interesting, though, in the direction of the Spanish language version, and why it's interesting to take a look, is unlike Todd Browning's kind of flat direction with his camera and the way he frames shots, the Spanish language version is much more dynamic and moving the camera in, dollying in and panning and really utilizing the set and the cinematography. So the Spanish language version, unfortunately, doesn't have the Bela Lugosi performance, but it is a much more kinetic film from a cinematography standpoint. The next honorable mention is Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, 1948. Now, growing up as a kid, everybody loves this movie. This is a rewatch every Halloween for me. And it's not on the actual list because technically you could consider it. I mean, it's equal parts a Universal monster movie, no doubt. But it's also equal parts an Abbott and Costello movie. And this kind of started off the Abbott and Costello Meet Monsters, which would go on to Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man and Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy. Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is the hands down the best of all of them. It also has Bela Lugosi's Dracula returning when he was a little older, and it also has Lon Chaney Jr. playing the Wolfman. Glenn Strange, though, takes over the role of the Frankenstein monster from Boris Karloff. If Boris Karloff had been the Frankenstein monster, I think that would have been a perfect casting, but Glenn Strange does a great job at this anyways. Abbott and Costello Meets Frankenstein holds up. It holds up as a comedy. It's really funny. It's equal parts monster. It's equal parts comedy. I think it's interesting how Universal had a great idea by mashing up some of their more iconic comedians like Abbott and Costello with their iconic monsters, and it became box office gold. If it's Halloween, put in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. You'll laugh your ass off. And finally, at number 1, Bride of Frankenstein, 1935. Now, you may say, Uncle Orlock, why isn't Frankenstein number 1? Why is Bride of Frankenstein a sequel number 1? Well, I'll tell you. If you haven't seen the two of them, as brilliant as Frankenstein is, Bride of Frankenstein, to me, just melds the comedy and the horror that director James Whale, became so known for. And it stars Elsa Lanchester, who was later married to actor Charles Laughton, as the bride. She doesn't really come in until later in the film, but she also appears early in the film as Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein, telling the story with Lord Byron's little party. That apparently the way this original story of Frankenstein was written by a 19-year-old Mary Shelley was when Lord Byron and a number of writers were stuck up in this country house during a storm, and they were all kind of challenged to come up with the scariest story, and Mary Shelley is the one who kind of beat them all by coming up with the story of Frankenstein, which in a sense is the original sci-fi story. Dr. Pretorius is kind of also another standout of why this film works so well, and he's another member of the sort of James Whale players. Colin Clive is back as Victor Frankenstein once again. You have Una O'Connor, who is seen in a lot of movies, including later on James Whale's of The Invisible Man, doing her shtick in this. You have Dwight Fry again, this time as another villainous henchman coming in. As you see, as you get the pattern here, that Universal had almost like a group of players, contract players, just like any studio had contract players at the time. But they kind of, instead of just having one actor play one role, they switched them around all the time, and it almost became like a repertory theater. And Bride of Frankenstein also features a fantastic score by composer Franz Waxman, one of the great composers of the classic Hollywood period. Probably next to The Wolfman, this has one of the best scores of all the Universal horror movies. So it kind of pushes it up there. So the combination of comedy, the combination of horror, the direct follow-up sequel to a great property, the actors, James Whale's direction. This is why Bride of Frankenstein, for me at least, rewatchability level is the highest on this one. To me, it's a masterpiece. It's number 1 of the classic Universal monster movies. Well, thank you for watching our first episode of Uncle Orlock's Vault. We're going to be getting into a lot of these horror movies, classic, newer movies, all sorts of movies. We're probably going to go back and do individual movies later on at a later time, so we can get into each of these monsters and their films and their whole series more in depth. But this was a basic overall. Next time, we're going to do independent producer Val Lewton, who's kind of the independent answer to the Universal horror movies. So stick around, come back, and you'll see more monsters and more horror. Coochie coo, baby. Jesus Christ. Rabies!